For 10 years, not a single drop of rain had fallen on the land of Aziza. The river was gone, just dry sand, where children once played. People said the queen was the reason for it all. They called her cursed, and they feared her. But one afternoon, when a storm of dust rose from the old riverbed, the queen saw something that would change her life. 3 children, half buried in the dirt, still breathing. The kingdom of Aziza used to be full of life. The river ran wide, farms were green, and no one ever went hungry. But that was a long time ago. Now, the land is dry. The air burns your throat when you breathe. Wells have turned to mud. In the center of the kingdom, inside the stone palace, lives Queen Mother Neka. She rules alone. Her husband, King Obina, died years ago. The people respect her, but they also blame her. They say the gods turned away because she could not bear a child. Every day she watches her people grow thinner, and the river that once fed them all lies silent under the sun. Late one afternoon, Queen Neka ordered her carriage to take her across the old river path. The sky looked strange that day. The air was heavy, and a faint wind rolled across the dry riverbed. Without warning, the wind turned fierce. Dust rose in thick clouds, stinging eyes and filling mouths with sand. Horses screamed, and guards shouted, trying to pull the queen's carriage back to safety. But through the red haze, Neka saw something move. A boy, maybe 13, holding 2 tiny babies close to his chest. He was thin, covered in dirt, and trying to keep them safe from the storm. The queen stepped down. Her guards begged her to stay inside, but she kept walking. The cloth wrapped around the children tore in the wind. Beneath it, she saw something small, a mark, behind one baby's ear. It was the shape of a crescent moon. The same mark carried only by those born from the royal family of Aziza. For a long moment, the queen just stared. The boy held the babies tighter, afraid she might take them away. Neka felt something deep inside her, a pull she had not felt in years. She turned to her guards and said quietly, "Bring them with us, now." When the queen brought the boy and the twins into the palace, the news spread fast. Servants whispered in the halls. Some said the queen had lost her mind. Others said the children were a sign from the gods. The palace had not seen babies in years, and now 3 had come from the dust. The boy was called Iken. When the queen asked about their parents, his voice shook. He said their mother's name was Amara. She made pots by the river, selling them to travelers. She died right after the twins were born. Their father, he said, was a man who came to the river often. He was kind, but never stayed long. The only thing he left behind was a small river stone. The queen took the stone in her hand. It was smooth and cool, shaped by water that no longer flowed. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by her window, thinking of her husband, King Obina, how he used to walk alone by the river, how he sometimes came home wet, though there had been no rain. There had always been sadness in his eyes. Now she began to understand why. Before sunrise, Neka went to the locked chamber where her husband's things were kept. She lit a small candle and searched through the drawers and boxes he had left behind. At the bottom of an old chest, wrapped in cloth, she found another river stone. It looked exactly like the one Eken had shown her. Beneath it was a folded piece of parchment, sealed with red wax. The queen broke the seal. The writing was her husband's. He had made a vow to the river priestess, a promise, that if he were given children, he would honor both families, one born of the palace and one born of the river. But the truth had been hidden. The vow had been broken. And since that day, the rains had stopped. The queen sat for a long time, staring at the two stones. For the first time, she saw that the drought was not just in the land. It was in her heart, and in the lies that had been kept from her. By morning, the queen called for a full meeting of the royal council. Word had already spread through the palace that the children carried the royal mark. Some of the elders came frightened, others came angry. Chief Emeka, the late king's brother, arrived first. He wore fine gold cloth and carried himself like a man who believed the throne should have been his. When the queen entered the hall, the room went quiet. She stood at the head of the long table, the two river stones placed before her. The council began to question her. They wanted to know why she had brought strangers into the palace. They said the river people had no place in the royal line. They said the drought was a punishment for this kind of shame. The queen listened without speaking. Then she told them what she had found, the king's vow, written in his own hand. She said the drought began because the truth had been hidden, because the promise made to the river had been broken. She lifted the two stones and placed them on the table. The room fell silent. Even Emeka stopped speaking for a moment. The queen said the children were not strangers. They wore her husband's blood. They carried the mark of the royal line and the sign of the river that once fed their land. The elders murmured among themselves, some frightened, others ashamed, but Emeka would not stop. He said the vow was a lie, that the children were proof of the king's weakness, and that keeping them in the palace would bring ruin. The queen stood still. Her face did not change. When she spoke, her voice was calm but heavy. She said the king's promise would be honored. The truth would no longer be hidden. The drought had taken enough from them, and she would not allow greed or fear to take the rest. She declared that the children would stay, and that the palace would open its doors to the river people once again. Emeka turned and left the hall without bowing. The council members watched him go, unsure what would come next. Outside, the air felt thick, as if the sky itself was listening. The council meeting ended, but the queen did not rest. She knew her choice had divided the court, yet something inside her had changed. In the days that followed, she spent less time in the throne room and more time with the children. The boy, Iken, stayed close to her. He helped her understand how people were living outside the palace, how the villages near the river were almost gone. Together, they began to send food from the palace stores. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in years, the queen walked among her people. At night, she watched the twins sleeping in the royal nursery. They were small, but strong. Their breathing reminded her of the sound the river once made when it was full. Every day, she felt the same thought growing inside her, that maybe the drought was never about the sky at all, but about what had been hidden in their hearts. One evening, near sunset, Queen Neka walked alone to the dry bed of the river Kosa. The air was still. Dust covered everything. She knelt on the hard ground and pressed her hands into the dirt. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice, she said that if love could heal what had been broken, she was ready to begin again. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But then she felt it. Cool drops on her hands, her face. The wind picked up, and the sound grew louder. Rain. For the first time in 10 years, it was raining over Aziza. People ran into the streets, shouting, laughing, crying. The dry wells began to fill, and the riverbed started to move again, dark with running water. The queen stood in the rain. Her face lifted to the sky, her clothes soaked through, her tears mixed with the falling water, and she smiled for the first time in years. Months passed, and the rain did not stop too soon or too long. It came when it was needed. The river returned, wide and clear, and the land began to heal. The fields turned green again, and the people went back to work with hope in their faces. The smell of wet soil filled the air. For the first time in years, children played by the river, just as their parents once did. Inside the palace, life also changed. The queen no longer sat alone in her stone hall. She spent her mornings with Aken and the twins, teaching them, feeding them, and listening to their stories. Aken grew tall and calm, careful with his words, loyal in his heart. The queen saw in him the same steadiness she once admired in her husband. When the time came, the council gathered again. There was no shouting this time. The queen placed her hand on Akon's shoulder and named him crown prince, not because of blood, but because he had already shown the heart of a leader. The people accepted him, and the kingdom cheered. Seasons turned, and the story of the drought became a memory. No one spoke of curses anymore. Instead, they told their children about Queen Nika, the woman who faced the truth and brought the rain back to Aziza. They called her the mother of the kingdom, and her name was spoken with love. And so the queen's days ended, not in silence or sorrow, but in peace. The land lived again, and her people remembered her, not as the barren queen, but as the one who gave them back their future. Years later, when people spoke about those hard times, they no longer talked about the drought or the hunger first. They spoke about how truth had saved them. They said that when the queen stopped hiding her pain and faced what had been broken, the skies finally opened. The river kept flowing, and every season brought new life. Aken ruled with patience and care, remembering what the queen had taught him. That strength means nothing without honesty, and that love can heal even what years of silence destroy. The people of Aziza built a small stone beside the river, where the queen had first knelt in the dust. They came there to give thanks each year when the rains returned. No one spoke of curses anymore. They said the queen had given her heart to the land, and the land had answered. And so the story of Queen Nika lived on, not as a tale of power, but as a reminder that the truth, once brought into the open, can bring back the rain. What would you have done standing in her place? Would you have taken in the children or turned away? Think about it and remember me times. Healing begins when one person chooses honesty over pride.